Hi, everyone. So we have one more module left for MCA 630, Digital Communications Leadership. And I'm going to deliver a brief lecture about followership, which is an important component of leadership. Let me share my screen with you and start the slideshow. So let's compare these two concepts. How is leadership related to followership, and how do they depend on one another? Leadership and followership are different at their core, but they represent mutually dependent concepts, dependent roles. Followership is reflected in a person's ability or willingness to accept the goals, the vision, and ideas of a leader. If we look into the role of a leader and how it compares to the role of a follower, we can distinguish the two by identifying leaders as superiors in different contexts, while the role of a follower represents the role of a subordinate. What are some of the most important features of a leader versus a follower? A leader guides or influences others. Their role entails taking charge, making decisions, and helping others move toward a goal. Good leaders are honest and confident. They have the capacity to inspire and communicate clearly their vision and their decisions to others. On the other hand, followers do not guide others, but they help the leader reach the goal. They're equally important as leaders because things are hardly going to be done without cooperation and teamwork. Good followers are loyal, they're willing to learn and responsible. They also nurture team spirit. We will talk about some other characteristics of good followers a little later. Let's take a look at why it is important to understand good followership in relation to leadership. There is an interplay between these two concepts, between these two roles, leaders and followers. Leaders guide followers toward accomplishing specific goals. And for these goals to be achieved, followers need to accept the leader's guidance and deliver results. The action and work ethics of followers are crucial because without them, even the best leadership could fail in meeting goals. We need to distinguish between active and passive followership and how important it is for followers to actively participate in the decision-making process, in bringing up ideas, in trying to provide feedback to the leader on what they do. So participation is crucial. And when we talk about good leadership and good followership, what we have in mind is how both can contribute to performing diverse tasks, to being successful at work, to successfully completing projects, to run a successful company, and so on. So in that regard, participation of followers is very important because not good followership does not mean that they're going to simply accept every idea that a leader has that they share with them or every rule they design. Good followership means that followers will also contribute to achieving goals with their own feedback, when their input and ideas. So they're not just accepting what leaders tell them to do, but they also they actively participate by providing feedback and input, by sharing their ideas. I'll give you an example. For this class, for instance, when I started running digital communications leadership, one of the things that I did was at the end of the semester simply asking students about if they wanted to share ideas about their final project or exercises and other assignments that I prepared for them for the semester. So I actually received a very good list of ideas and input that I was able to incorporate next time I ran this course. So good followership means not just accepting what leader does, but also providing and sharing some ideas on certain aspects that they can improve. In many ways, followers and leaders are similar, even though we created a distinction between these two roles. There are also characteristics that are similar. So followers engage in the work and they provide constructive feedback for leaders in order to make informed decisions. So if we look at this, we see the importance of both leaders and followers participating in the decision-making process. Leaders and followers also need to demonstrate competence and build trust with each other. So this trust building and loyalty refers to both roles, both the role of a leader and a follower. Looking into good leadership and followership, I was thinking of a scenario and how actually a leader can have an impact on followers. Like, what is it that we can do to make sure that the followers, the people working in our company, um, implement ideas that we share with them? One of the things that I consider, I like in the past, I frequently mentioned group projects that you worked on in class. So I gave some class-related examples to explain the importance of teamwork, the importance of task-oriented leadership in some situations, the importance of transformational leadership, and so on. So I wanted us to look at this scenario because the scenario will explain, like, we look at the specific scenario as an example that will show us how both leaders and followers are important in conducting in implementing a project. The scenario that I had in mind would be an annual company party. So let's think of what kind of role does a leader have in this scenario? So what is it that they need to do in order to make sure that the annual company party goes well? So the first thing that they need to do, they need to take into consideration their followers and what every person in that company, how every person in that company can contribute to to organizing the annual company party. And the reason I wanted to share this example with you is basically we're in the field of communication. Many of you are going to be involved in event planning. So I wanted you to think about this example and what is it that a leader can do to make sure that every follower, every member in the company that is in charge of this annual company party can do to ensure that the party, that they organize a successful party. So one of the things to do is to think about which followers or which members, which employees in your company are good for every or one or two of the rules listed here. So you will think about a person, you're going to assign the role of creating a budget for the party, and then another person will need to find a venue and make a reservation, or maybe one person will cover two or three of the things. Somebody will be in charge of creating a guest list, another person will be sending out invitations, and then there'll be a person in charge of entertainment and catering. So it's, if you work in a company and you know your employees well, you will know how to assign these roles. So you will look at the people who are good with um, who know like catering companies well, can take care of the food, and then you will think of who would be the best to create a guest list and so on. Other things to consider is, as we're discussing digital communications in this course, other things to consider aside from creating a guest list and creating a budget for the party and so on, we also need to figure out which applications to use to communicate with guests and communicate with other employees. If someone is falling behind as a leader, you should speak with them directly. Also, assign a person who will share images and videos via social media and communicate with social media followers. So this is what a leader should do when they organize people in their company who will work on this event planning. But then what is it that followers can do in this case scenario? Should they simply stick to their roles, or should they go behind, or should they go actually beyond these roles? So when we discuss followership and how important it is to participate, to take a participatory role in your company, to make sure to share your ideas, provide feedback, and so on, you can propose things such as, hey, aside from Slack and WhatsApp, I think we should also communicate with people on other platforms such as Viber or maybe Facebook Messenger and so on. So just like be whatever role you take, just make sure to be proactive, or if you cannot share any ideas, update your leader on your progress related to your role regarding that event planning. Let's take a look at the relationship. What is it that we can identify as the most important components of this relationship between leaders and followers? And to circle back to the event planning, in order for everything to be smooth, trust is important. Knowing who is the person that you're going to assign this role to and trusting that person that they will be able to carry out the task at hand. So teams in general work best when leaders and followers communicate effectively and trust each other. And that's the reason why I listed all of these things, because one of the ways to communicate well with others is to set clear instructions, to clearly assign roles to everybody and what they need to cover within that role. So teams work best when leaders and followers communicate effectively and trust each other. And clear communication, effective communication helps leaders express their expectations, and it also helps followers suggest improvements or raise concerns. Without strong leadership, without effective leadership, followers lack direction, but also unity. Good leaders value followers' input and needs, so they don't feel threatened by your ideas, your suggestions. They take them into consideration and accept what they think is right for the project or for the company. Both leaders and followers are accountable for the group's success. So the group's success does not only depend on the leader, but also on the followers and their willingness to deliver, to provide feedback, to share their ideas, to complete tasks, and so on. I mentioned this active roles of the active role of followership. According to these two scholars, there are three such roles of active followership. They include interactive, independent, and shifting. The core idea behind this active roles of followership is that in a dynamic environment, in a dynamic company, followers are expected to enact various types of jobs and might substitute or neutralize leadership. So in some cases, you might end up taking many tasks, like being accountable for many tasks, and maybe even direct others as a follower, take that role of the leader and direct others towards achieving a goal. What is active? If we compare active versus passive followership, and why is active followership important? Active followership grants more power and involvement to assist leaders to form the final decisions. So active followership does not just depend on the followers themselves, but it also depends on a leader. Like some leaders simply delegate tasks, but in most cases, leaders also expect involvement of others in making that final decision. And that is why active followership plays an important role in regards to such leadership. Passive followership, on the other hand, obeys the orders passed by leaders. Let's take a look at some of the key characteristics of good followers. We mentioned them at the beginning of the lecture, but let's reflect on a few. Loyalty is one of the key characteristics. So loyalty contributes to trust building, reliability. If I assign a role, if you need to take care of the budget for this annual company party, then I need to know that I can rely on you to create a budget that will ensure covering all expenses and not putting our company budget in jeopardy. Honesty is also important. If you are unable, or if you feel that you don't have the capacity to complete a task, but you feel that you would serve better in some other roles, then be open to your leader and explain your position. Work ethics. So everybody needs to invest effort in completing a task. It is important to communicate effectively and to not transfer any responsibilities at work to others, but to complete the tasks assigned to you. Don't be late, don't drag your assignments, and so on. Be on time. That is just part of your work ethics. Understand the organization. It is important to understand how the organization functions and what is your role in it, and what are also other people's role. What are organization's goals, and so on. So you need to be aware of all of these things. Enthusiasm, so show that you have the capacity to work, that you like the work that you do, that you're willing to communicate and cooperate with other people in your company, which is another important characteristic of a good follower. Be cooperative, be a team worker, communicate with others, help them in completing their own tasks if you have the time, and show them that you're there to assist them in their duties when needed. And finally, the last but not least important is having good communication skills. So I cannot emphasize this enough, especially because we're in a communications program. Work on your communication skills, both in-person and digital communication skills. They're equally important for contributing to an overall positive climate and work. And communication skills are also important to effectively express your opinion, to effectively to give effective feedback, to communicate your needs, and so on. It was an interesting study that I found, and I asked you to read for this module. The study was about followership and mental health, and how important it is to pursue certain leadership roles in order to have good followership, in order to be successful at the work you do. Many scholars have studied how leaders' behavior impacts followers' mental health. In this course, we mentioned several different types of leadership. Among them are transformational. It's the type of leadership where that is prone to the type of leadership that can transfer their enthusiasm and vision to others. So transformational leadership basically has positive impact on mental health of followers. Destructive leadership has the impact of destructive leadership on followers is negative. According to this study, it was relations and task-oriented leadership were the strongest predictors of positive mental health outcomes. And it was interesting that these two types of leadership were even stronger predictors than transformational leadership. So apparently, with task-oriented leadership, where people are told directly what they need to do, and when they're focused on certain tasks that they need to complete, it has that, like the clarity of it has a positive impact on their mental health. On the other hand, destructive leadership, and to a lesser degree, laissez-faire leadership, they were the most strongly associated with negative impacts on positive mental health outcomes. So basically, their impact on mental health was negative. Now, let's wrap this up by looking into 10 rules of good followership. The most important thing is not blaming your leader or your boss for an unpopular decision or policy. Fight with your boss if that is necessary. But to circle back to some of the previous lectures on leadership, arguing and providing negative feedback, is it good or is it bad? Is it welcomed or not? Yes, you can provide negative feedback, but then think about the delivery and what way, how you're going to deliver that negative feedback. Regardless of what you need to do, negative feedback is sometimes needs to be delivered, but the way we communicate that is important. So you need to be respectful to the person that you're delivering that negative feedback to. Make the decision and run it past the boss. Accept responsibility whenever it is offered. Tell the truth. It is, as I mentioned, trust building and reliability are some of the key components of good leadership, good followership. Do your homework and know the weaknesses and the strengths while plans are being implemented. Keep your boss informed. So don't, if there is anything I mentioned previously in this lecture, like especially when it comes to planning events or when it comes to implementing a project, if there is anything that goes wrong, you need to keep your leader or your boss updated about it. If you see a problem, fix it. Put in more than an honest day's work. So this was a brief lecture, and I provided several articles that I would like you to read to understand these concepts better. I also have an exercise for you. So I want you to read the 3 scholarly articles that I assigned for this module, and then reflect on 5 key characteristics of effective followership. Consider how each of these traits applies within the context of digital communications, and write like an essay of about 300 words. These are my references for this brief lecture, and thank you very much. If you have any questions or if you have any concerns, let me know. It was really nice sharing these ideas with you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good week. Bye-bye.